Class 6, Chapter 9, Living Organisms, Characteristics and Habits. Pali and Bujo went on vacations to many places of interest. One such trip took them to the river Ganga in Rishikesh. They climbed the mountains of the Himalayas, where it was very cold. They saw many kinds of trees on these mountains: oaks, pines, deodars, very different from the ones near their home on the plains. In yet another trip, they traveled to Rajasthan and moved on camels through the hot desert. They collected different kinds of cactus plants from this trip. Finally, they went on the trip to Puri and visited the sea beach, dotted with the casuarina trees. While recollecting all the fun that they had on these trips, a thought struck them. All the places were so different from one another. Some were cold, some were very hot and dry, and some places so humid. And yet all of them had many organisms, living creatures of a various kind. They tried to think of the place on the earth where there may not be any living creatures. Bujo thought of place near his home, inside the house. He tried the cupboards. He had thought that there may not be any living organism here, but he found one tiny spider in the cupboard. Outside the home, too, there did not seem to be any place he could think of that did not have a living creatures of some kind or the other. Pelly started thinking and reading about far away places. She read that people have even found a tiny living organism in the openings of volcano. So the organisms were found everywhere. Organisms and the surrounding where they live. Organism means any living thing. Okay. Another thought that occurred to Paheli and Bujo was about the kind of living organism that were present in a different location that they had visited. The desert and had a camel, the mountains had a goat yard, Puri had some other creatures, crabs on the beach, and such a variety of fish being caught by the fishermen at the sea. And then there did seems to be some creatures like ants that were present in all the different locations. The kinds of the plant found in each of these regions were so different from the plant of the other regions. What about the surroundings? In these different regions, were they the same? Obviously, there is some variations in the surrounding. Now, there's activity one is done to find out the different surroundings affect the life there. 9.2 Habitat and Adaptations. What do you find from the plants and animals listed in your activity? You find a large variety. Look at them. What you have entered in the column of the desert and the column of the for the sea in table. Did you list very different kind of organism in those two columns? What are the surroundings like? These two regions. In the sea, plants and animals are surrounded by saline water. Saline means a salty water. Most of them use the air dissolved in water. There is a very little water available in the desert. It is very hot in the daytime and very cold at the night time in the desert. The animals and plants of the desert live on the desert soil and breathe air from the surroundings. The sea and the desert are very different surroundings, and we find very different kinds of plants and animals in these two regions, isn't it? Let's look at some two very different kind of organisms from the desert and the sea, a camel and a fish. The body structure of a camel helps it to survive in a desert conditions. Camel have a long legs which help to keep their body away from the heat of the sand. They excrete a small amount of urine there during its dry. Dung is dry and they do not sweat. Since camels lose very little water from their bodies, they can live for many days without water. That is called an adaptation for the camel. Let us look at the different kind of fish. Some of these are given in this figure. There are so many kinds of fish, but do you see that they all have a something common about them, their shape? Yes, all one shows here have the streamlined shape that was discussed in chapter 8. This shape helps them move inside the water. Fish have a slippery scales on their bodies. The scale protect the fish and also help in the easy movement through the water. We discussed in chapter 8 that the fish have a flat fins and a tail that help them to change the directions and keep their body balanced in water. Gills present in the fish help them to use oxygen dissolved in the water. We see that the feature of the fish helps it to live inside water and the features of a camel help it to survive in desert. We have taken only two examples from a very wide variety of animals and plants that live on the earth. In all this variety of organisms, we will find that they have certain features that help them live in the surroundings in which they are normally found. The presence of specific feature of certain habits which enable an organism to live naturally in a place is called adaptation. Adaptation of an organism differing depend on their places of dwelling. That is why a fish cannot live out of water and a camel cannot live in a sea. The place where organisms live is called a habitat. Habitat means a dwelling place or a home for them. The habitat provides food, water, air, shelter, and other needs to organisms. Several kinds of plants and animals live in the same habitat. The plants and animals that live on land are said to live in a terrestrial habitats. Some examples of terrestrial habitats are forest, grassland, desert, coastal, and mountain regions. On the other hand, the habitats of plants and animals that live in water are called aquatic habitats. Lakes, river, and ocean are some examples of aquatic habitats. There are large variations among the terrestrial habitats like a forest, grassland, desert, coastal, and mountain regions located in different parts of the world. The organism, both plants and animals living in a habitat, are its biotic components. The non-living things such as the rock, soil, air, and water in the habitat constitute its abiotic components. Are sunlight and heat biotic or abiotic components? Think about it. We know that some plants grow from seeds. Let us look at some abiotic factor and their effect on seeds as they grow into young plants. So we have studied about the germinations, how the seed germinated, right? By giving them a water and proper care. So that's all about the activity that help the plants to grow. Adaptations does not take place in the short time because the abiotic factors of regions also change very slowly. So those organisms which cannot adapt to this change, they die. And only the adaptation once survive. Organisms adapt to different abiotic factors in the different ways. This results in a wide variety of organisms in a different habitats. Let us look at some habitats understood, the abiotic factors, and the adaptations of animals in these habitats. A journey through different habits, some terrestrial habits. So for example, let's talk about the deserts. We discussed the abiotic factors of a desert and the adaptations in camels. What about other animals and plants that are found in desert? Do they have same kind of adaptations? There are desert animals like rats and snakes which do not have a long legs like that camel has. To stay away from the intense heat during the day, they stay in burrow deep in the sand. This animal came out only during the night when it's cooler. Show some typical plants that are grown in a desert in the figure, and there is an activity is given, right? For the cactus, they have the leaf with the spikes, and actually they don't have the leaf, actually they have the stems which is hard enough. and having green pigment in it so they can do photosynthesis. Desert plant lose very little water through the transpiration. The leaves in a desert plants are either absent, very small, or they are in the form of spines. These help in reducing the loss of water from the leaves through transpiration. The leaf-like structure you see in a cactus is in fact its stem. Photosynthesis in these plants is usually carried out by the stem. The stem is also covered with a thick waxy layer which help to retain water in the tissue of a cacti. Most desert plants have roots that go very deep into the soil for absorbing water. Mountain regions. These habitats are normally very cold and windy. In some areas, snowfall may take place in a winter. There is a large variety of plants and animals living in the mountain regions. Have you seen the kind of this tree shown over here in the figure? If you live in the mountain region of have or visited this place, you may have seen a large number of such trees. But have you ever noticed such trees naturally growing in other regions? How are these trees adapted to conditions prevailing in their habits? These trees are normally cone shaped and have sloping branches. The leaves of some of these trees are needle-like. This helps the rainwater and snow to slide off easily. There could be trees with a shape very different from the sun that are also present on the mountains. They may have a different kind of adaptations to survive on the mountains. Animals living in the mountain regions are also adapted to conditions. They're, they have a thick skin or fur to protect them from the cold. For example, yak have a long hair to keep them warm. Snow leopard has a thick fur on its body. So that's animal adaptations, including feet and toes. This protect its feet from the cold when it walks on the snow. The mountain goat has strong hooves for running up the rocky slopes of the mountains. As we go up in the mountains regions, the surroundings change and we see different kind of adaptations at different heights. Grasslands. A lion lives in the forest or grasslands and is a strong animal that can hunt and kill animals like a deer. It is light brown in color. Look at the picture of a lion and that of a deer. How are the eyes placed in the face of these two animals? Are they in the front or the side face? Lions have a long claws in their front legs that can be withdrawn way inside the toes. Do the features of the lion help in it a way to survive? It is a light brown color helps it hide in the dry grasslands. When it is hunt for prey, prey means the animals to eat. The eyes in the front of the face allow it to have a correct idea about the location of its prey. Look at the deer. A deer is another animal that lives in the forest and the grassland. It has a strong teeth for chewing hard plant stems of the forest. A deer needs to know about the presence of predators, animals like a lion, that makes the prey in order to run away from them and not become their prey. It has a long ears to hear a movement of predators. The on the side of its head allow it to look in all directions for danger. The speed of the deer helps them to run away from the predators. There are many other features of the lion, a deer, or other animals and the plant that help them to survive in their habitat. Some aquatic habitats. Ocean. We already discussed how the fish are adapted to live in the sea. Many other sea animals have streamlined bodies to help them move easily in water. There are some sea animals like a squid and octopus which do not have this streamlined shape. They stay deeper in the ocean near the seabed and catch any prey that moves towards them. However, when they move in water, they make their body shape streamlined. These animals have a gills to help them use oxygen dissolved in water. There are some sea animals like a dolphin and whales that do not have the gills. They breathe in the air through the nostrils or blowholes that are located on the upper parts of their body, their heads. This allows them to breathe in the air when they swim near the surface of the water. They can stay inside the water for a long time without breathing. They come out to the surface from time to time to breathe in air. Did you ever see these interesting activities of dolphins in television program or the films on ocean life, ponds and lakes? Have you seen the plants growing in ponds, lakes, rivers, and even some drains? Go on a field trip to nearby ponds, if possible, and try to observe this kind of the plant that's seen there. Observe the leaves, the stems, and the roots of this plant. Some of these plants have their roots fixed in the soil below the water, like one shown in this picture. And terrestrial plants' roots normally play a very important role in the absorptions of the nutrients and water from the soil. However, in aquatic plants, roots are much reduced in size and their main function is to hold the plant in a place. The stems of these plants are long, hollow, and light. The stems grew up to the surface of water, while the leaves and the flowers floats on the surface of water. Some aquatic plants are submerged in water. All parts of such plants are underwater. Some of these plants have narrow and thin ribbon-like leaves. This can be bent in the flowing water. In some submerged plants, leaves are often highly divided, through which the water can easily flow without damaging them. Frogs usually live in ponds. Frogs can stay both inside the water as well as move on land. They have a strong back legs that help them in a leaping and catching their prey. They have webbed feet which help them to swim in water. We have discussed only a few common animals and plants compared to a wide variety that live in a different habitats. You may have also noticed that wide variety in the plants around you. When you prepared a herbarium as a part of your suggestion activity in chapter 7, imagine the kind of variety that you could see in a herbarium of leaves or plants from all regions of the earth. So, the characteristics of organisms. Went on a journey through the different habitats and discussed many plants and animals in the activity 1. We listed objective plants and animals found in the different surroundings. Suppose we stop a while and think which examples in our list are living. Let us think about the example of forest, trees, creepers, small and big animals, birds, snake, insect, rock, soil, water, air, dry leaves, dead animals, mushroom, and moss. Maybe only a sum of these objects that are present in the forest. Which of these are living? Think of an object that you can see around you at this moment and group them as a living and non-living. In some cases, it's easy for us to know. For example, we know that the object like a chair and table are not living. Paley was reading this rhyme from the Complete Nonsense written by the Edward Lear. Now, Paley and Bujo found that the poem very funny because they knew that chair or the table is not living, alive, and it cannot talk or walk. Chair, table, stone, or a coin are not alive. Similarly, we do not know that we are alive, and so are all the people of the world. We also see animals around us that are so full of life: dogs, cat, monkey, squirrel, insect, and many others. How do we know that this something is living? Often it is not so easy to decide. We are told that plants are living, but they do not move like a dog or a pigeon. On the other hand, a car or bus can move. Still, we consider them as a non-living. Plants and animals appear to be grow in a size with the time, but then at the time clouds in the sky also seems to grow in size. Does it mean the clouds are living? No. So how does one distinguish between the living and non-living things? Do living things have some common characteristics that make them very different from the non-living? You are a wonderful example of living being. What characteristic do you have which makes you different from the non-living things? List a few of these characteristics in your notebook. Look at your list and mark those characteristics that you have listed, which may help you to be found in animals or plants. Some of these characteristics are perhaps common to all living things. Do all organisms need a food? Yes. In chapter 1 and 2, we learn about the living things need a food and how essential it is to make animal and to us. We have also learned that the plants makes their own food by the process of photosynthesis. Animals depend on the plants or the other animals for their food. Food gives organisms the energy needed for them to grow. Organisms also need energy for other life processes that go on inside them. Do organisms show growth? Does the kurta you had 4 years back still fits you? You cannot wear it anymore, isn't it? So you must have grown taller during these years. You may not realize it, but you are growing all the time, and in a few years you will become an adult. Young ones of animals also grows into adults. You would surely have noticed pups grows into adults. A chick hatch from an egg grows into a hen or a cock. Plants also grows. Look around you and see a few plants of the particular type. Some are very small and a young one. Some are bigger. They may all be in a different stages of growth. Look at the plant after a few days and a week. You may find that some of them have grown in size. Growth seems to be common to all any living things. Do you think non-living things shows growth? Okay. Do all organisms respire? Can we live without a breathing? When we inhale, the air moves from outside to the inside of our body. When we breathe out, the air moves from inside our body to outside. Breathing is a part of a process called a respiration. In the respiration, some of the oxygen of the air we breathe in is used by the body. We breathe out carbon dioxide produced in this process. The process of breathing in animals like cows, buffaloes, dogs, or cats is similar to humans. Observe any one of these animals while they are taking rest and notice the movement of their abdomen. The slow movement indicate that they are breathing. Respiration is a necessary for all living organisms. It is through the respiration that the body finally obtains energy from the food it takes. Some animals may have different mechanisms for the exchange of gases, which is a part of respiration process. For example, earthworm breathe through their skin. Fish, we have learned, have gills for using oxygen dissolved in water. The gills absorb oxygen from the air dissolved in water. Do plants also respire? Exchange of gas in the plants mainly take place through the leaves, and the leaves take in the air through tiny pores in them and use the oxygen. So they give out carbon dioxide to the air. We learn that in sunlight, plants use carbon dioxide to produce the food and give out the oxygen. The amount of oxygen released in this process of the food preparation by plant is much more than the oxygen they use in respiration. Respiration in the plant takes place day and night. Do organisms respond to stimuli? How do you respond if you suddenly step on the sharp object like a thorn while walking barefoot? How do you feel when you see a thing about your favorite food? You suddenly move from a dark place into the bright sunlight. What happens? Your eyes shut themselves automatically from a moment till they adjust to the change of a bright light or surroundings. Your favorite food, bright light, and a thorn in the above situations are some examples of change in surroundings. All of us respond immediately to such changes. The changes in our surroundings that make us to respond to them are called stimuli. Do the other animals also respond to the stimuli? Observe the behavior of animals. When food is served to them, do you find them suddenly become active on seeing the food? When you move towards a bird, what does it do? Wild animals run away when bright lights is flashed toward them. Similarly, cockroaches begin to move to their hiding place if the lights in the kitchen is switched on at night. Can you give some more example response of animals to stimuli? Do plants also respond to stimuli? Flower of the some plants blooms only in the night. In some plants, flowers close after sunset. In some plants, like a mimosa, commonly known as a touch me not, leaves close or fold when someone touches them. So these are the examples of response of plants towards the change in their surroundings. In activity 4, we learn about the plant spotted into the dark room and how they move towards the sunlight. Living organisms and excretions. All organisms need a food. Not all the food that is eaten is completely used, only a part of this utilized by the body. What happened to the rest? Has to be removed from the body as a waste. Our body produces some of the waste in other life process also. The process of getting rid of this waste by organism is known as excretions. Do plants also excrete? They do, but not as seen in the animals. The mechanism in the plant are little different. Some plants find it possible to store the waste product within their parts in the way that they do not harm the plants as a whole. Some plants remove waste product as a secretion. Excretion is another characteristic commonly to the all organisms. Do all the organisms reproduce their own kinds? Have you ever seen nest of some birds, like a pigeons? Many birds lays eggs in the nest. Some of the eggs hatch and young birds come out of them. So the animal reproduce their own kind. The mode of reproductions may be different in the different animal. Some animals produce their young ones through eggs. Some animals give birth to the young ones. The plant also reproduce like animals. Plant also differ in their mode of reproductions. Many plants reproduce through the seeds. Plants produce seeds which can germinate and grow into a plant. Some plants also reproduce through the part of the other seeds other than seeds. For example, a part of the potato with the bud grows into the new plant. So plant also reproduce through the cutting. Would you like to grow a plant in this way to yourself? You can just try to rose plant, cut the stem and then plant it. Living things produce more of their own kind through the reproduction. It takes place in the different ways or different organism. Do all organism moves? In chapter 8 we have discussed the various way in which the animal move. They move from one place to another and also show other body movements. What about the plants? Do they move? Okay, plants are generally anchored in the soil so that they do not move from one place to another. However, various substances like water, minerals and the food synthesized by them moves from one part of the plant to other. Have you noticed that any other kind of the movement the plant does? Opening or closing flowers? Do you recall some plants of that such kind of the movement shown in them, responding to the certain stimuli? We also have some non-living things moving, of course, a bus, a car, a piece of small paper, clouds, and so on. Is there something different in this moment from the moment of living being? There is a such variety of living organism, but all of them show some common characteristics as we have discussed. Yet another common characteristics is that the living being die. Because organisms die, particular types of organism can survive over thousands of years only if they reproduce their own kind. One single organism may die without ever reproducing, but the type of the organism can exist only if there is reproduction. So we see that all living things seems to have a common characteristics. They all need a food, respire, response to stimuli, reproduce, show movement, grow, and die. Do we find some non-living things that also have some common characteristics like this? Cars, bicycles, clock, and the water in the river move. The moon moves in the sky and the cloud grows in the size in the front of our eyes. Can such things can be called living? We ask ourselves, do that object also shows all characteristics of living? In general, something that is living may have all the characteristics that we have discussed, while non-living things may not show all these characteristics at the same time. Is this true? Always true? Do we always find the living things definitely shows all the characteristics of the living that we have discussed? Do we always find the non-living things and may shows only some of these characteristics and never all of them? To understand this a little better, let us look at the specific example. Consider seeing say a monk is living. Is it living? So it can stay in the shop for a month and not show any growth of some of the other characteristics of life. However, we bring them same seeds in the plant in soil, water it and turn into a whole plant. Did the seeds need a food? Did it excrete, grow, reproduce when it was in the shop or many months? We see that there can be a case when we cannot easily say that the things has all the characteristics that we have discussed for its be called living. When? What then is life? Push your hand deep inside a sack of wheat. Do you find it is warm inside? There is some heat being produced inside the sack of wheat. The seed respire, and that process give out some heat. We see that respiration is a process. They take place in the seeds even when some of them other life process may not be very active. It may not be very easy to answer our questions. What then is life? However, looking at all the diversity of living beings around us, we can conclude that life is beautiful. That's the end of the chapter.